Hello friends, good afternoon and welcome to the EduSat Network. Our topic of discussion today, in fact, I would like to let you all know that we are beginning a new series today, Understanding International Relations, and today's lecture shall be a brief introduction to it, which shall be followed in the subsequent lectures by the concepts, theories and the methods as part of our series. And friends, for this series conducting this particular one, we have with us in our studio our subject expert, Dr. Rajan Kumar, Assistant Professor, School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. He has been teaching for nearly a decade, and Dr. Kumar is also engaged in an international project funded by the European Union. And just a bit about Sir, he has coordinated various national and international seminars as well as conferences. With this brief introduction, I would like to welcome Sir once more. Thank you so much, Sir, for coming.
Thank you, Roshi. And in the new series that we are starting today, I'll talk about international relations. Earlier in the discussions, as you might have seen on the YouTube, we discussed about India's foreign policy and India's bilateral relationship with a number of countries. But today I'm moving towards the proper academic discipline, which is known as international relations. And if you know about international politics, international relations, you might be knowing that initially in the earlier times it was considered to be the part of political science. It was also considered to be part of history in many places, and even now in many of the universities they have even the subjects like history and political science, they have a course or subject on international relations. But gradually, in the early part of the 20th century, IR as we call it, IR is short form of international relations. IR started emerging as an independent discipline, which was in the primarily during the First World War, after the First World War period, in between the First World War and the Second World War period. That was the period when the discipline started emerging, primarily in the United States and also in United Kingdom, Britain. Gradually, over the time, now international relation has become a discipline in itself, and it is taught in most of the good universities throughout the world as a separate discipline. Although it is interdisciplinary in nature, because in IR as a subject, it takes from political science, it takes from sociology, it takes from history, law, journalism. But now international relation is taught as a completely new discipline. Now the question that might be in your mind that why should we learn about international relations? What is the new thing that we are going to learn if we join international relations or if we learn international relations? Suppose if you're coming from, say, if you're not from this planet, if you come from a different planet, say if you are coming from the Mars in the space shuttle and you are coming to the Earth. Suppose if you come from a different planet, how do you understand international relations? If you come from a different planet, for instance, the way Amir Khan in the new movie The PK, that in case you have seen that, the way he comes and he tries to understand the religion in a completely neutral perspective. So suppose if you come from a different planet, how will you understand international relations? I think if you come from that place, what you will see that there are boundaries. There are certain boundaries from after which the people cannot move from one place to other. And then again you will see that if you go towards the sea, you will see that there are different ships with a lot of the lot of luggage or the baggages which are coming, or in the ships loaded with those kind of stuff which are moving towards the seashore, and there is a checking there, so goods are moving from one place to other. Then again you will see that if you have to move from say one place to other, it's possible that you're moving without any restriction, you're moving without any kind of hindrance. But again you will come to a point where after which there will be army and there will be a boundary, demarcated boundary, after which you cannot move from one place to other. So you will see that that people have organized in different people are organized in certain territories, that within territory you can move freely from one place to other, but when you want to move from one particular boundary to other boundary, So then you will see that you have to take a certain permission. That permission is in the form of you have to apply for the visa, you need passport to apply for the visa. Your passport is your national and this your passport gives you the national identity. Your visa gives you the permission to move into a certain other territory or certain other country, as you call it. So as you know that in the international system that we see today, the people are organized into what we call the nation state or the country. So there is no space except probably Antarctica or the deep sea, which are not divided into the nation state territory. So they are part of all the geographical places in the world that you see today. They are part of one of the nation state, except of course the deep sea or the Antarctica, where the boundaries are not clearly demarcated. So and people are organized into what we call nation state. So every person, man or woman, belongs to one particular nation state. So nation state is the main demarcation which is there in the international system. So nation state, even now, it plays a very important role. But please understand that beyond nation state, there are certain, as I told you, that there is movement of ship from one country or one boundary to other, or movement of people from one boundary to other. And when you use internet, for instance, you can get in touch with without any political boundary, without any restrictions or the hindrances. You can get in touch from one place, sitting in one place. You can get in touch with people in United States, Australia, Africa, South Africa. Everywhere you can move. Your information, your messages can go from one place to other place without any hindrance. So what you see is two kind of demarcators. One is that the nation state, which tells you that you can move freely within that particular nation state, but also there are certain developments which are taking place in the form of globalization, where there is a movement of trade and goods from one place to other. The information flow is taking place from one place to other. Then there is migration of the migration of labor, and the capital flow is taking place from one boundary to other. So these are the two kind of developments that you see in today's international or the global system that we call it. One is that nation state is still very important, where the boundaries are important, your political identity attached to that particular politico-geographical unit, which is the nation state. But at the same time, there are certain features which are beyond the nation state. For instance, as I told you, the flow of capital, labor, or the information flow of information which is taking place. So for that, you need to have an understanding which goes beyond the nation state. Your understanding of nation state is not enough. You need to understand what are the factors or what are the causes of these, what are the issues which go beyond the nation state. For instance, today, if you see the world today, the way certain issues are coming up, whether it is the issue of trade, whether it's the issue of terrorism, the diseases, and the issue of the information revolution has created a situation where we can exchange ideas with the people across the world. So for that, you need an understanding which cannot be understood just by the narrow understanding of the nation state or the state. So for that, we have a discipline which helps you understand these new issues in the international system. And what is happening because of the flow of capital, flow of labor from one place to other, flow of information. Your political imagination, political and social imagination, the identity is also changing gradually. Now, your identity is on the one hand you have the local, ethnic or the national identity, but at the same time you have an identity. You may have an identity which is beyond the nation state. For instance, you belong to one particular nation state and you are working with a permit in other country. Many of the Indian workers, for instance, they go to the Gulf countries, they go to United States, European Union, they also go to Australia and other places to work. So they have the national identity, they have the national passport, but they also have a kind of identity which is cosmopolitan, or which is kind of international, which is not just a national identity, because they're working in a completely different place. They're interacting with the issues which are not which cannot be resolved within the nation state. Then you have other issues, for instance, the environment or the climate change. Climate change, as you know, is an issue which is affecting different parts of the world, and there's a fear that the global warming which is taking place today, that global warming is affecting global warming the problem of global warming cannot be controlled by any one country. It has a global or international dimension. Similarly, when wars take place, you have the example of World War I, you have the example of World War II, and several other wars. For instance, the kind of conflict which is there in West Asia today, the ISIS, Islamic State of Syria and Iraq, what they call it, and the way they are trying to expand from one political boundary of Iraq to other political boundaries, and they say that the Islamic State should control not just Iraq but also Syria, Lebanon, and other places. So they have global dimension, or they go beyond the nation state. They also go beyond the region. Implications of these kind of developments cannot be controlled by any one state, no matter how powerful that state is. The issue of terrorism, for instance, and the issue of terrorism, as you know, the issue of terrorism cannot be controlled by any one particular state, and it has a regional and global dimension. So, as a response to that, what are the methods that the people are trying to solve these kind of global or international issues? One is that you try to form an organization which is multilateral, which includes a number of states. You have regional organizations. For instance, you have organizations like European Union. You also have organizations which are universal in nature. By and large, for instance, United Nations, where every state is a member, and you also have organizations like World Bank or the IMF, where most of the nation states are member. You also have the organizations which facilitates trade, for instance, like WTO. So these are the issues which have broader international dimensions. So how do you understand the activities, the policies, and the programs of these organizations? So these are the broader areas which are covered by the discipline of international relations, and international relations is emerging as a very important discipline in today's world. In India, for instance, if I have to tell you, earlier there were very few places where international relations was taught as a separate discipline. Jawaharlal Nehru University has this department called School of International Studies, which was one of the oldest organizations or oldest institutions which started teaching international relations in India. And there are other places, for instance, Jadavpur University in Kolkata, then Mahatma Gandhi University in Kerala, then Gujarat Central Universities, and now some they have certain specific area study programs in several places like Punjab, Jammu and Kashmir, and in other places IR is also taught, but it's possible that IR is not taught as a separate discipline. It's possible that IR is taught as a part of political science in most of the universities. So this is the brief background of the discipline of IR in India. Now I'll take you gradually to take you briefly to the way this discipline emerged in the early 20th century, and what are the way it developed later throughout the world, and then I'll also talk about a little about theories and the concepts and the methods which are used in international politics, international relations. We'll also try to understand how do you define international politics, or how do you define international relations. So I'll start with the kind of historical background in brief, and then I'll move to excuse me. So I'll give you the historical background of this discipline in the early 20th century, and then I'll move to the theories and the concepts which are popular in international relations, or which are used to understand the international politics today. But please understand that in today's lecture I'll be giving just the brief overview of international relations, and since this is a series where I'll be talking about the various aspects of international relations in the next few lectures. So I'll give you a brief overview today, and then I'll be in the next lecture I'll be very specific about certain issues. For instance, what are the theories in international relations, whether it's the realism, liberalism, constructivism, or critical theory, feminist theory. So we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about various methods which are used in international relations, whether it's behavioralist method or the post-behavioralist or post-structuralist, post-positivist method. So we'll be talking about those things gradually in various lectures. But today's lecture is to give you a broad overview of international relations as a discipline and the kind of theories which are used in international relations. So, first, please understand that when I talk of international relations, in many of the places they'll be talking of international politics. In many places, they prefer the term international studies because if you try to understand narrowly, international relation would mean the kind of the relationship which is there between one state and the other, or the way one nation state behaves with the other state. What are the kind of what is the behavior of the state when it comes to dealing with other states? But in today's context, it's not just the relationship between the two countries. IR, international relation, is not about the foreign policy. Foreign policy is specific to one state, but an international relation is also not just about the relationship between the two states or a number of states. And that's the reason some of the people prefer the term international politics, because they say that the issues of climate change, which are not related to international relations, but which is part of international politics. Then issue of terrorism, which is not related to just the international relation between the two states, but it involves some kind of politics. And so some of the people prefer the term international politics, because they think that the politics which is taking place between or among various states in the international system, so that should be the broader area of study for international relations. So the IR, the term can be a little confusing, because although it says that international relation is the term, but it has a wider meaning, which so it covers politics, but it covers not just politics, it goes much beyond that. If you see international relations today, it covers politics, it also covers economy, it covers the social issues of international system. It also covers issues like human rights. It also covers issues like energy, climate change, the crime, the cross-border crime which takes place, smuggling, drug trafficking. So there are a number of issues which are discussed in international relations today. So politics is one part, and there are people who try to understand international relations from political perspective. And then there are issues like what are the norms which are developing between the two states. So they have normative framework of understanding international politics. The people who study the trade between various countries, trade or the cooperation which is taking place between various states, so they try to understand from that perspective, the international politics from that perspective, or the economic aspect of international relations. And there are certain issues which are not political, which are not economic. For instance, as I told you, the climate change, the issue of rights, human rights, the humanitarian interventions, the peacekeeping forces, or the controlling the transition of drugs, or controlling the drug trafficking from one place to other. So these are the broader issues which are covered in international relations today. So it has moved much beyond just the relationship between the two states. So international relations should not be understood just as a narrow relationship or the foreign policy of one state and foreign policy of one state against the other. So that is the broader understanding of international relations, which is developing in the discipline of international relations today. Subject area I already discussed. About the subject area of international relations, and I'll also talk about the theories and approaches, and that will clarify you, and that will give you a better understanding of what international relation is today. So IR as a discipline, this, as I told you, that it developed around World War I period, and I'm talking of this exactly 100 years back. This is 2014, and exactly 100 years back, in 1914 was the period when, you remember the First World War. First World War began in Europe, where there were the two sides. One, you had this the Central Powers, which were Turkey, Germany, and Italy. The other, on the other hand, you had Britain, France, and later joined by United States. So there were two sides, and the World War started exactly 100 years back. So after the World War, the huge, the millions of people, as you know, a million of people were killed. There's no exact figure, but it was the most devastating event in the entire human history. So after that, there was a realization that that the international system or the countries should evolve a mechanism through which these kind of devastations can be avoided. They should try to control, or they should try to check the kind of conflicts which are taking place, which have huge impact on the human society. So 1914 to 1918-19, that's the period of World War I. And 1918-19, you have this, after the World War I, you have the conference, this Paris Peace Conference, where how to resolve, how to settle the issues which were there a bit after the World War I. So how to resolve some of the issues, how to create a situation where this kind of conflict does not arise again. So people, like the victors, which were France, Britain, and America. So they were the part of this Paris Peace Conference, and they try to evolve a mechanism through which this kind of devastating event can be avoided in future. So they had two basic arguments, or they put forward two essential methods to avoid a World War I kind of situation. They said that the secret diplomacy, which was secret diplomacy, created a kind of suspicion among the various alliances which were there before the World War I period. So the countries should not involve in the secret diplomacy. On the positive front, what they said, that they should try to form an organization like they talked of this League of Nations. League of Nations would be an organization where there would be where this organization, collectively this organization, with the help of member states, they'll try to stop any kind of war which might erupt between the member states. The also second argument was that they should also try to develop a liberal model of state, or because most of the members believe that that democracy is an essential ingredient, or democracy is the one way through which the dictatorships can be stopped from emerging, and dictators are the one who are responsible for the World War I. So they had to evolve a mechanism, or they started promoting the democracy in the member states, so that the dictators do not emerge there, because it was believed that the emergence of dictatorial rulers were one of the causes of the World War I. So they started promoting democracy in the member states, and the reason was to avoid the World War I kind of situation. So, and in the earlier period, and as I'll discuss later in the discussion today, Woodrow Wilson, who was the American president. So Woodrow Wilson also gave this 14-point formula, and that 14-point program was some of the elements of some of the aspects of those 14-point programs were used in the Paris Conference for the settlement of World War I issues. So Woodrow Wilson was a liberal scholar, and he discussed about how to create, how to have a program internationally how to create an organization like League of Nations, and also how to promote democracy in the member states. So the Paris Conference actually borrowed some of the ideas of Woodrow Wilson. So that was the period, up to the World War I. That was the period when this IR as an academic discipline started emerging, and the IR scholars in that period, most of them were from either they were from history background, or they had a legal background, or they were the real practitioners of diplomacy. They were diplomats from various countries. So they were and some of the people were also journalists. So they were the ones who started writing about the issues of international relations. So the first generation, you had the historian, diplomat, and the legal luminaries. So these were the type of scholars who started writing about international relations. Later on, after the World War II, a different kind of discipline started emerging, and they came from different backgrounds. Many of them came from political science background. Some of the people also came from science background, mathematics background, mathematics and physics background, and they had a very different kind of approach and methods, which we'll discuss in lecture in the later part of discussion today. But please understand that that IR as a discipline, because it practically most of the scholars in this discipline were either most of them were from United States of America, and some of them were from United Kingdom, Britain. Few could be from Germany and other places, but most of the scholars were either American or Britishers. So America had a huge impact on the discipline, and the way the discipline emerged. Even now today, the discipline of IR is dominated by the American intellectuals. If there's as I say it in some of the lectures, that the IR as a discipline is, even today, IR as a discipline is dominated by this Western, white, and English intellectuals. Very rarely you will find that IR has a theoretician or a great scholar who is not from this the categories that I told you: Western, white, English, and male. So this is the category that if you see in one of the scholars, the greatest scholars in this discipline, that most of them would be from this category. This is and this has certain biases. For instance, the IR today, if you see the traditional mainstream IR, so mainstream IR today is basically it covers the great power politics. It covers about the war and peace, which is basically the World War I and World War II, and now they also talk about various other wars and conflicts. But the IR is rooted in the World War I and World War II. They also try to, even the liberal scholars in IR, they try to ignore some of the issues which are very important for the third world countries or the developing countries like India and China. For instance, the traditional mainstream IR, which is taught in most of the countries, or the way it's taught in the United States, United Kingdom, and European countries, and even India today, they do not have. They start from World War I period and the World War II period, but even then they do not cover the period of colonialism. Now the point is that you should ask yourself, or you should try to understand, why is it this kind of bias in international politics? This bias has partly to do. This bias is partly because the discipline emerged in a country which did not experience the kind of colonialism that we experienced in a country like India and China. So the Africa, the Southeast Asia, the South Asian countries, and the Latin American countries, their impact or their worldview is not reflected in the IR the way it should in a proper neutral kind of IR. So this is the kind of bias which you have in international relations, and you should be careful about that. So today I'll give you a broader overview of the mainstream IR and some of the critiques which are there in the mainstream IR. And in the later lectures, the lectures of the next lecture whenever I give you, so in those lectures I'll cover the broader specific theories and specific concepts of IR. I'll also tell you that gradually, in countries like India and China, gradually the IR is emerging. India, in many of the universities now is being taught, and the important thing to understand is not that this is being taught in a particular place. The important thing is that whether the IR is being taught from the Western perspective, or there are certain alternative perspectives which are also emerging. Even in Indian university, most of the times, the way it is taught from the typical Western perspective. So there's a need for scholarship which is not coming from the Western worldview. There's a need for alternative IR. There's a need for IR which is emerging, which takes into account the worldview of the Asian colonial countries, which takes into account the worldview of Latin American countries, African countries, and only then you can understand IR from the only then it can give you a kind of holistic perspective of IR. Otherwise, IR would be dominated by the same Western scholarship. So, what are the major stages which are there in the IR? I think the first IR is as a discipline. Sometimes it talks of the Westphalian system and the rise of nation state. So that is the period. Even if in the IR, even if the historians of IR, international relations, when they go into history, they'll be talking about the Westphalia system. Westphalian system, as you know, it basically talks about the rise of modern nation states, which emerged after 1648. Westphalia, the Treaty of Westphalia was signed in 1648, which led to the end of 30 Years' War in Europe. So after that, the modern nation states emerged, and they became the defining feature of the global system today, international system that we have today. So from that 1648 or the first half of the 17th century till now, the nation state is the main feature which demarcates people, which also demarcates the geographical boundaries. So nation state has remained very important. Please understand the way nation state is understood today. Nation state is not a permanent feature, and nor you can say that nation state will remain a permanent feature after say 100 years or so. Gradually, in fact, as you see that most of the European states today have become part of what we know as European Union. So there is a kind of gradual integration taking place in terms of economic activities, the migration or the trade, or the way people are trying to understand or form their identity. So there are kind of new identities, new common values are also emerging in the form of on the form of a system which goes beyond the nation state. So nation state was not fixed in the earlier times. There was no nation state before broadly before the 16th century or 17th century. There were states. Please understand, there were states and the empires. For instance, you had Mauryan Empire, you also had Greek city-states, you also had Mughal Empire, you also had states. There were various states. But the way we understand nation-state today, nation-state is understood, understood as a modern phenomenon which emerged after the Westphalian system, and modern nation-state became the defining feature of the international system. So, and it also it has a certain objective features, and nation state has also subjective features. Objective feature like language, territory, and the important thing, as you know, is sovereignty, government, etc. So these are the broader objective features, but also there are subjective features like people's attachment to a particular political geographical boundary. So that attachment, that subjectivity is important for the nation state, and that attachment, as you see, basically is a modern feature, or is understood at least as a modern feature, although there are certain critics who argue that nation state is not a modern feature. There was a concept of, for instance, in India there is a concept of Rashtra. The way we understood Rashtra, which is the Hindi definition of nation state, so Hindi meaning of nation state. So Rashtra is not a new concept for India. There were a concept of Rashtras which were there in the ancient times. So there are certain critiques of that the Western definition of nation state. But by and large, in the mainstream literature, nation state is treated as a modern phenomenon of the last 300 to 400 years maximum. So that is the one phase of from Westphalian to the World War I. So that is the first, that is taken as the first phase of international relations. The second phase is taken as the end of World War I period and the 20 years the crisis which followed after the World War I. So practically between the World War I and World War II. So those years were crucial for the development of IR as a discipline. The third phase was World War II and the alliances that emerged. That is again, that gave a very solid understanding of the international relations, and that led to many of the realist paradigms which emerged after the World War II period. And the next phase comes is when you have the bipolar system in the IR, international relations. Bipolar system was, on the one hand you had the Soviet Union and the Allies, on the other hand you had the United States and its NATO allies and other countries which are part of the system. So bipolar system that emerged in the Cold War period. So broadly from 1945 till 1990, till the time of the disintegration of the Soviet Union. So that was a period, a new period in international relations, which is taken as the bipolar system or the Cold War period of international relations. After that, what is happening in the post-World War period, post-Cold War period, and I'm talking the period from 1991 till now, that is a period of which is known in the literature as the post-Cold War period. And what is happening in the post-Cold War period is again an important issue for the scholars and the theoreticians of international relations, that they are trying to say that the world is moving towards some kind of multipolarity. After the Cold War, after the end of the Cold War, a phase came, especially in the 1990s, when the world became, it appeared that the world has become unipolar, where US is the only important country in the world today. But after that, after that, a new kind of world is emerging, and even today, economically, we can say that the world is multipolar, where China, Japan, Germany, India, these are the important countries economically, and they are emerging economically as very important, powerful countries. But militarily, in terms of military power, the United States is still the most dominant power. If you see the military expenditure of the United States, it's nearly $650 billion. Compared to that, and that $650 billion is equal to the military expenditure of all other countries put together. So you can see the difference between the United States, which is the most important military power today, and the other countries which are also emerging militarily powerful. Other countries like India, China, and Britain, France, and then Brazil. These are countries which are again militarily very important. Russia is, of course, the only, in terms of military, Russia is second only to United States. So these are the countries which are again militarily important. So there is a kind of new world international system which is emerging, where you have United States as the most important economically as well as militarily, but there are other countries which are trying to catch up. So that has thrown up a new challenge for the scholars of international relations. So these are the broader phases of international relations. And now, how do people understand these phases or these developments which are taking place in international relations? I'll try to explain in terms of theories and also methods. So there are various theories which try to understand international relations, and there are various methods through which the scholars try to understand international relations. If I talk of theories, then the first is the liberal theory, the classical liberal theory, which try to understand the international relations in the early 1920s and 30s. And even before that, they had some philosophical rooting in Immanuel Kant's philosophy of this international relations. So liberalism in the early years, that is the first phase of this international relations. And the second was the realism, which emerged after the failure of the League of Nations. Then there was an extension of liberalism in a new form, which is neoliberalism, which emerged in the 1960s and 70s. Then again you have neorealism, which tried to redefine realism, and it gave a new methodological perspective to realism. Then there is other approach which is known as the international society approach, which emerged in Great Britain, which basically most of the scholars the prominent scholars were from that place. And recently in the 1990s and later, we also see a new approach or new theoretical a new theory which has emerged and become very popular in international relations, and that is known as constructivism. Apart from that, there are certain theories which are critical of all these theories, and they are known as critical theories. And in critical theories, we will be talking about some of the theories, for instance, the radical theories like Marxism or the dependency theory that you might have heard of. We will also talk of the feminist theories in international relations, and some of the theories which are post-positivist. So in critical theories, we'll talk about basically three radical theories. We'll talk about the feminist theories, and we'll also talk about the post-positivist or post-structuralist theories which are there in the discipline of IR. So you have the mainstream theories of realism, liberalism, and constructivism, and then you have critical theory, the three critical theories which I told you. So we cannot finish the various aspects of these theories in just one lecture. So I'll gradually in the next few lectures will explain one by one what is realism, what is liberalism, what is constructivism, and what is critical theory. But today again I'll give you the broader overview of various theories. After that, I'll talk about the two methods. One is the behavioralist method. What is behavioralism in IR? And I'll also talk about the post-positivist methods which are there, which are used by various scholars to understand international relations. So that's the purpose of this lecture, and I'll start with liberalism and in the early years, the way liberals try to explain or try to understand international politics. As I told you that the liberalism basically emerged in the aftermath of the World War I period, when they tried to devise mechanism, or they try to understand why these wars first take place and how can these kind of wars be avoided in future. So after First World War, after the kind of the catastrophic impact on the human society, so Wilson's 14-point program, he gave the 14-point program in 1918, which became the part of Paris Peace Conference, which established the League of Nations in 1919. And Wilson's program basically talked about the promotion of democracy, self-determination, and creation of an international organization which will help avoid the World War I kind of situation. So that was the first part of this liberal, the early liberals, early liberals like Wilson, or the other thinkers like Norman Angell, who wrote the work Great Illusion in the early 20th century, and he argued that how even if the state wins a war, the state actually does not benefit from the war. So nobody wins in the war. That was the argument of that book, The Great Illusion, that nobody wins in the war because of the catastrophe in both the sides. Even the victors have to face such catastrophe in a war that it's not worth it. So you gain nothing out of war. So they argued that the wars should be avoided at every cost. So among the liberal thinkers, there are people like Immanuel Kant, the perpetual peace, who gave the argument that the wars can be avoided if the states become democratic, because democracy develops certain norms, or they behave in a certain way which leads to the broader cooperation between the two states. And if there is a cooperation between the two states, this will lead to this will avoid the situation of war in international politics. So in the early liberals, starting the Immanuel Kant, who was the liberal philosophy is rooted in the philosophy of Immanuel Kant. But among the liberal thinkers, you can talk of Wilson and Norman Angell, and there are other people as well, which we'll discuss when we talk about liberalism in detail. But please remember that liberal worldview focuses on this human nature, which according to them is rational and essentially cooperative. they're not conflictual as the realist people would like to define it. So human beings are rational and essentially cooperative. For them, a real politic is a jungle where dangerous beasts roam around, and they can be caged by international organizations. So they believe in the nation state. They also believe that in the nation states, the states can be dangerous, but if you form an international organization, so these beasts can be caged by the international organizations. The liberals also, they focus on the interdependence between the various states, because economic interdependence, then the flow of capital and people from one place to other. So because of this, they cooperate. The states try to cooperate, and this will ultimately lead to peace and cooperation in the international system. And because of these reasons, they also try to form international institutions. For instance, the League of Nations in the early period, or later on United Nations, or now as you see the World Trade Organizations, or the SAARC and other regional European Union, ASEAN. So these were the organizations. The liberals would argue that the people try to cooperate for the economic benefit, for other benefits, and they will cooperate through institutions. So institutions and interdependence. So that will lead to broader cooperation between the nation states. So that is the basic argument of international and the liberal scholars in international relations, and they focus on international law, interdependence, cooperation, international organization, and peace. So these are the broader focus areas of liberal scholars. But what happened in the historical period, that League of Nations failed. As you know, that League of Nations could not stop the emergence of World War II kind of situation. So finally, the League of Nations failed because Germany joined very late in 1926 and left in 1930s when Hitler became powerful in Germany. Germany left the League of Nations. Russia joined in 1936, and it was expelled in 1940 when it tried to capture, when it had a war with Finland. Japan left in 1930s, and the US, although Woodrow Wilson, as I told you, that he was the major supporter of the creation of an international organization which will balk or which will stop any kind of war kind of situation. But despite Woodrow Wilson coming from United States never became the member of this League of Nations. So these were the reasons why the League of Nations failed, and that was taken as a kind of the failure of liberalism, that liberalism is not capturing the essence of the way nation states behave with each other, or they're not capturing the competition or the rivalry which is there between the nation state. Then there was also a period of economic depression in the since 1928, and you have the rise of Nazism and fascism in Europe. So these are the developments which were taken as a failure of liberalism and failure of League of Nations. So gradually there is now that led to kind of a shift in understanding of international relations, and people, the scholars, for instance E.H. Carr, he tried to explain international politics in a realist perspective. And I'll come to that very soon. So what I'm trying to say that these were the developments which led to a situation where people started questioning the importance of liberalism in international relations. So what do you see after that? The realism as a new theoretical paradigm is emerging, and there are classical realist. Classical realist, I mean, the people who are right from the ancient period till the modern period, who have certain basic assumptions about the way humans behave. You have the Thucydides, who was a Greek scholar who wrote about the Peloponnesian War of the Greek city-states, and then you have the Machiavelli, who wrote the book, the famous book, The Prince, and the Hobbes, who tried to define the state and the nature of human. And later in the 20th century, you had the E.H. Carr, who wrote on the 20th crisis. So classical realist would include three scholars, Thucydides and Machiavelli and Hobbes, and later the contemporary realists, there are E.H. Carr, and there are other people like Morgenthau and Kenneth Waltz, and there are other people. in other scholars in international relations. So the basic assumption of realist is that human nature is, as Hobbes would define, the famous definition of Hobbes of nature of human, poor, nasty, selfish, brutish. So he argued that the human nature is basically conflictual, that the interest of human beings clash and they are conflictual in nature, so which leads to not only conflict between the state, between the people, but that also leads to conflict between the states. So human nature is at the base of the classical realist. Also Morgenthau, when he wrote the book, the famous book, Morgenthau is known in international relations or international politics as the father of realism. So he wrote the famous book called Politics Among Nations. So in that he tried to define the human nature, and there he considered human nature is at the base of international relations. And for him, international politics, like any other politics, is nothing but a struggle for power. So international politics is basically the struggle for power among the various states that you have. And he gave the 6 principles of international relations, which we'll discuss when we discuss about realism. But broadly, there are 3 things that you should remember about realism: that realists understand human nature as based on self-interest and conflictual. Second, they think that since human nature is conflictual, so the states will also behave in a similar way, where the state try to promote the power of they try to aggrandize power in the international system. So the focus of realist would always be on survival of the state, how to acquire power, military and armament, so that the state becomes powerful, economic empowerment of the state, and of course the human nature, which is conflictual, and the conflictual nature of the state in the international system. So these are the basic assumptions of realist, and state is the main actor, and power in the struggle would be one of the core focus of the realist scholars in international system. Then you have neoliberals who focus on interdependence and institutional cooperation. Here the difference between liberalism and neoliberal is that they adopted the behavioralist method, and they repudiated the idealism and normative values which were there among the classical liberals. There are scholars like Cohen and Joseph Nye and Peter Haas who argued that how economic integration will facilitate peace and cooperation in the international system. The famous, the Republican liberalism or democratic peace of Michael Doyle, who argued that if the states become democratic, so that will lead to the peace in the international system, because the liberal scholars believe that the democracies do not fight. So if the states become democracy, so that the wars will disappear from the international system. So that's the basic argument of democratic peace theory, and which we'll discuss when we discuss about liberalism in detail. So among the neoliberal thinkers, you have Robert Cohen, Haas and Carl Deuce. So these are the scholars that you can read when you talk about neoliberalism. And then the realism was again you have in the earlier period you have liberalism, which was modified by the neoliberals. Similarly, you had the realism, which was modified. Some of the arguments were modified by neoliberals, and among the neoliberals, the father of neoliberal by the neorealist. So among the father of neorealist is Kenneth Waltz, who wrote the book Theory of International Politics in 1979, and he shifted the focus from human nature to international system. So here the focus and the basic core of analysis was not human nature, but the core of analysis was the structure in the international system. And according to Kenneth Waltz, there's a structure in the international system, and that structure is anarchic, in the sense that there's an anarchy in the international system because there is no because international system is defined by the absence of global government. You have the government, sovereign government at the state level, but you do not have any government at the international level. So that's the reason you have an anarchy in the international system, because there is no world government. United Nations cannot be taken as the world government, because there's some of the rules because United Nations also depends on the nation state for the implementation of rules and norms. So neorealists, they also talk about the great power balance, whether it comes through bipolarity or multipolarity. So these are some of the issues which are discussed by the neo-realist. Then you have the international society approach, which borrows from both realism and liberalism, which says that it's basically a combination of realism and liberalism, which takes the state as a kind of combination of master star, which is power state. A state has both elements, which is a power state, and also it has constitutional norms and rules. So it's a combination of realism and liberalism. And there are group of states who form a society of common interest and values. They argue that UN has both power dynamics as well as the general or the legal dynamics or the law. For instance, the Security Council is a reflection of the power dynamics of United Nations, and the law is formed through the General Assembly. So any state similarly has both the power dimension as well as the legal and the normative dimensions. So they try to combine these two, liberalism and realism, in their arguments. Famous thinkers in this category are Martin White, the famous thinkers of international society approach, and Hedley Bull. So these are the two scholars that you can read in the international society approach. Then there is constructivism. Alexander Wendt is considered. Alexander Wendt of United States, he wrote a book, Social Theory of International Politics, in 1990s. So that is considered as kind of the beginning of constructivism in international relations. It basically, it emerged as a critique of realism, and it believes in this values, identities, norms in the international system. It rejects the anarchy in the international system, but it believes in the structure of, there's a structure, but according to them, the structure is not anarchical. So they focus on the norms of the international system, the laws, identities, the way international organizations form certain values and common identities in the international system. So these are the basic focus, and we'll talk in detail when we talk about constructivism later in the lecture. Then there's just to briefly point out, there are two methodological approaches which are very popular in international. One is behavioralism, and the second is post-positivist approaches. I think we'll because of the shortage of time today, we'll discuss about these methods in the lectures, in the later series of lectures that I'm going to follow in the next few weeks. So I think with this I come to the conclusion of my presentation, and I hope you liked the introduction of international relations, and if you have any questions, you can ask me on the YouTube or after the lecture, and I'll be happy to answer that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for presenting a very wonderful introduction in a very clear, lucid manner for our students that would form the base for our future lectures. And friends, tomorrow we shall be continuing with this series, and another lecture shall be presented for you. So with this, I am giving you a perk to stay tuned in for the next lecture, and also with this we thank sir. Thank you so much, sir, for the lecture, and thank you friends for watching. Have a great day.